Can the iPad replace her MacBook? That's a tough one. And frankly, I don't know the answer either. It really depends. To be honest, I think that's the wrong question to ask. There is a lot of videos out there like replacing my Mac with an iPad for a week, but in my opinion, most of them miss the point. By now, I think Apple has made it quite obvious that they don't want exactly that to happen, so instead they make the iPad shine elsewhere. A much better question would be, do you really need a MacBook for the work that you're doing, or will an iPad be enough for that? The iPad has a lot of features to offer, so I understand that some of you may want to replace their MacBook with an iPad. I ditched my MacBook Air for an iPad Pro and I'm quite happy about my decision, but if I'm being honest, you really have to love the iPad Pro to replace your MacBook with it. Now obviously the iPad Pro is far from replacing a real computer, but let's start with its strengths. One of the standout features of the iPad Pro is its display. Apple for some reason is obsessed with giving the iPad the best hardware that they can create, so the iPad Pro has always had the best display that Apple could offer. Depending on which iPad you're gonna buy, you're either gonna get the best LCD, the best mini LED, or the best OLED display that Apple can offer. And by the way, with the M4 iPad Pro, even the 11-inch model gets the tandem OLED display, so you no longer have to get the biggest one. But I suggest doing so anyway, because the iPad Pro really makes use of its display, so it's really worth it. Actually, if you're interested in a video which iPad to buy, leave a comment down below and I'll make a video about that too. Anyway, I've got an M1 iPad Pro right here with what Apple calls the Liquid Retina XDR display. The screen delivers incredible color accuracy, brightness and contrast. Whether you're watching movies, editing photos, or just browsing the web, everything looks fantastic. Basically, it's like an OLED panel without the drawbacks of an OLED, but make no mistake, Mini LED has its drawbacks too. The biggest drawback of an OLED display is blooming, which can be annoying. An OLED panel doesn't have blooming, but it struggles in other areas, like for example brightness and burn-in. Apple has solved the brightness problem of the OLED display by adding a second panel and calling it Tandem OLED, but since the M4 iPad Pro is new, we can't quite yet judge about the burn-in problem. So let's take a look at the iPhones here. So the iPhone offers OLED panels since iPhone X. We can see that they have aged pretty good. There have been very few cases of burn-in on the iPhone, so we can expect the same from the M4 iPad Pro. The next MacBook Pro will probably offer the same OLED panel, but for now, an iPad with an M chip will offer a much better display in the same price range. Also, the iPad has a touchscreen, which makes it easier to use as a daily carry computer. The MacBooks will most likely never offer that feature. The Pro Motion feature also makes a huge difference, providing a buttery smooth 120Hz. As of late, the MacBook Pro also offers a mini LED display with a high refresh rate, but they're completely in different price points. The good thing about the 120Hz display on the iPad is that the iPad Pro can also make use of its display in games because of the M chip. For example, Genshin Impact supports 120Hz, which makes the game much more enjoyable, and there have been quite a few games lately which added support for 120Hz on the iPad Pro. As the iPad Pro gets more powerful, App Store starts to fill with games that will make use of it, so who knows, maybe you'll be able to use the iPad Pro as a gaming console down the line. The Apple Pencil is another game changer. It's perfect for note-taking, drawing, and even precise editing tasks. The latency is virtually non-existent, so it really makes it feel like you're writing on paper. To be honest, I've gone through the last years of my apprenticeship with the iPad Pro. At first, I was kind of skeptical of this idea because it felt kind of weird bringing an iPad to school where everybody was just taking notes on paper and I was the only one with an iPad, but it turned out to be great. In fact, it was so much better than writing on paper. I could refine my notes, add diagrams, pictures, and so much more. It's much easier to find and store your notes. GoodNotes recognizes your handwriting and you can search for specific words or topics. Editing with the Apple Pencil is also a big part of the user experience. For example, I'm doing photography as a hobby and I edit everything I shoot on the iPad Pro. Even these YouTube videos are completely edited on the iPad purely because it's so much better. When I edit on my computer, the editing process starts to feel like a 9 to 5. It's getting frustrating and it's taking the whole fun out of it. However, when I edit on the iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil, it just feels so much more natural and intuitive. It feels like I'm working on an art piece and have it right in my hand. And to be honest, I'm also much more productive because it doesn't feel like a desk job anymore. If it wasn't for the iPad Pro, I probably would have never started this YouTube channel or even my hobby as a photographer. So I can definitely say that the Apple Pencil and the iPad Pro enabled the more creative side of you. Let's move to the battery side of the iPad Pro, and It's overall great. It held up pretty well after years of use. I previously had an iPad Pro from 2018. With that iPad, I started my hobby as a photographer, so I used to edit on it for days on end. I only sold it after 4 years because I got a good offer on the M1 iPad Pro, otherwise I probably wouldn't have sold it, and the battery life was still amazing after 4 years. And even on my M1 iPad Pro, which has a much faster CPU, the battery life is also great. You can easily get a day of content consumption and a few hours of intense gaming. However, the iPad will quickly burn through its battery once it gets hot. See if you need it to last for editing a large number of photos or a timeline of 4K video with B-roll, forget about taking it outside. You will quickly burn through its battery in a matter of 3 to 4 hours, and most likely you won't get your work done. While it's nice to use it around the house where you could easily just plug it in at any time, it's going to be half as useful outside, especially in direct sun. The speaker quality of the iPad Pro is amazing. It delivers clean and loud audio, which is quite impressive for a device this thin. Take a listen yourself. To be honest, I'm really impressed how Apple manages to get this level of audio out of this thin device. Watching movies on this in HDR, yeah, I wish I could say the same about the camera of the iPad Pro. I mean, it gets the job done. There's nothing exciting about it. Stage view is somewhat nice, it follows you nicely around. I mean, it just works. There's nothing more and nothing less to say about the front camera. As for the back camera, I don't even want to get into that. If you're that one person who shoots video on the iPad, please don't. To be honest, I don't even understand why the iPad Pro has a back camera and why does it have to stick out, Apple? Funniest thing about the camera is that the box that the iPad came in has a cutout for the camera. Should I make a cutout at my table too? Why does it have LiDAR? Has anybody used LiDAR on the iPad Pro? So many questions. Look, it's fine for scanning documents, but let's be honest, you'd be much better off scanning them with your iPhone. Now, let's talk about the apps that truly shine on the iPad Pro. Apps like Lightroom, CapCut, DaVinci Resolve, GoodNotes, and Procreate are a joy to use on the iPad Pro. If these are the apps that you use, clearly the iPad Pro is what you need. As I said, the touch interface and Apple Pencil support makes creative tasks feel intuitive and fun. The M chip really rips through editing apps. To be honest, the editing apps are one of the only apps that can truly bring the iPad to its knees. However, while these apps are great, they do have their limitations. For instance, CapCut doesn't have the auto-delete feature for silent parts of the video, and Lightroom lacks some advanced color grading options. DaVinci Resolve is trying to bring the full functionality to the iPad Pro, but it still lacks quite a few features, and don't even get me started on Photoshop. Photoshop is so bad on the iPad Pro that I'd rather use Affinity Photo instead. And see, this is where the problem starts with the iPad. It's great for simple tasks like email, media consumption, creativity, or even design work, but as soon as you start asking for more, the iPad quickly raises its middle finger. I mean, yes, the iPad Pro has the Apple's latest M4 chip, but as soon as you find some apps that can actually take advantage of that power, the app either limits your abilities to use it or throttles the M chip so hard that it becomes impossible to use until the iPad has cooled down. And if you keep using the iPad while it's throttling, it's not only going to be extremely unresponsive, but it's also going to be uncomfortable to use because of how hot it's going to get. So while yes, it can handle extreme load, but it can do so for long enough for you to use it as a productivity machine. And I've not even started talking about iPadOS. iPad is straight up designed in a way to make it unusable for tasks that you would usually do on a MacBook. Just so nobody gets the idea of replacing very expensive MacBook with an iPad, because Apple wants you to buy both. First up, file management is a nightmare. I received a .rar file over email and the iPad simply refused to open it and extract it. I had to rush to a computer to get the job done. There was nothing I could do on the iPad, and that's just one example. With the iPad as the primary computer, there's going to be a lot of frustrating moments like this one. While using the iPad as a real computer, I always have this kind of inner urge to switch to a proper computer to finish the job that needs to get done. Apple has made some blatant attempts at making iPadOS more desktop-like, but to be honest, it all just feels like fan service, so people stop complaining that the iPad isn't pro enough. Let's just take Stage Manager for example. A lot of apps have their own rules when it comes to Stage Manager. Some apps won't allow you to extend them, won't work with other apps, and those are also running in Stage Manager or straight up interfere. For example, when I'm on my computer watching YouTube, I also like to scroll through Reddit on my second monitor. With the iPad, you have the ability to open a second app while watching YouTube, but even opening the app can sometimes be a pain in the butt. For whatever reason, it won't let you resize the app from where you want. You have to move them around first. When you're watching YouTube and scroll on Reddit or let's say Twitter and some random ad starts playing, even if the ad has no sound or is just a simple GIF, for whatever reason it will pause your YouTube video. So you have to play your YouTube video again, and then you start scrolling on Reddit again, and then some random ad starts playing again in the background and it pauses your video again and again and again and again, and it's just frustrating. The iPad is just not made for multitasking, and Stage Manager frankly is just Apple throwing dust in your eyes, so you stop complaining about the iPad not being pro enough. It's quite sad if you think about it. Then there's this issue of storage. You can't add it straight from an SSD or SD card, which means you have to import files to the iPad first. This not only wastes time, but it also takes up valuable storage. If you have a base model iPad Pro with 128 gig, you might even run out of memory before you finish importing all the files to edit. So sometimes iPadOS can be really frustrating, although I have to say some apps like for example LumaFusion and DaVinci Resolve, these allow you to add it straight from the SSD. Lightroom, however, for whatever reason, it doesn't. iPadOS in general, it just lacks some features that any modern OS should have. Sometimes you even can't copy files over without issues. Look, if you're trying to copy files over and you have previously imported some of those files, the iPad will offer you to replace the files you already have imported or keep all of them instead of just keeping the ones that you already copied. This just makes no sense. When I say iPadOS is full with this kind of inconveniences, that's what I mean. These limitations can get quite a bit frustrating, especially when you're used to the full desktop functionality. Clearly, Apple doesn't want the iPad Pro to be a competitor to the MacBook. And then the question is, who's the iPad for? And most importantly, can it replace your MacBook with all of its downsides? So after thoroughly testing the iPad Pro as a MacBook replacement, here's my takeaway. While it's a fantastic device for creative work and everyday tasks, it still falls short for more demanding professional use due to software limitations and file management issues. It can handle bursts of load and various workarounds for some limitations you'll just have to live with. In the end, you have to decide whether it's all worth it to you. Is it worth it having a small, lightweight, powerful device that can do most of the daily tasks but might require you to search for workarounds and limit your productivity? Frankly, I don't know. It's all up to you. To me, as I said, it was worth it. I ditched my MacBook Air for an iPad Pro, but I also have a stationary PC that I might use for occasional work. All I have to say is that if you're willing to accept that the iPad Pro is never going to replace your MacBook Pro in terms of productivity, then the iPad Pro is going to be an amazing device. But if you expect your iPad Pro to completely replace your MacBook Pro, that is just not going to happen. So would I recommend replacing your MacBook with an iPad Pro? Sadly, I have to say no for now, although I really want to say yes. Part of it is because sometimes I try to use it as a computer replacement, and most of the times I enjoy doing so. I really wish it could replace my computer because it's just so good when it works. However, I have to accept that the iPad Pro has its shortcomings as a real computer, and its main purpose is just to be a creativity device. Treat it like a MacBook Pro Lite, if you will. The key takeaway is that if you need a creativity machine, you can definitely come by with just an iPad, but if you need to be productive, the iPad is only gonna get you this far. So in my opinion, it's best to have a real computer to go along with the iPad. That's when you're gonna enjoy the iPad Pro the most, and it's gonna get all the frustrating moments out of the equation. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If this video was helpful to you, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more tech videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.